Welcome to Module 9, Transition from Attacking to Defending. During a match, there are 4 phases of play, shown here. This module will focus on the transition from attacking to defending. In other words, it will teach you what to do the moments after your team loses possession. Here is a framework, listed in order, of how to react as your team transitions to the defensive phase. Important to note is the initial press, which occurs when a team commits players, generally for a designated number of seconds, to regain possession immediately after losing it. Because of the variance among teams in how they use it, we will not be focusing on it in this module, but we encourage you to ask your coach about how it is used on your own team. The first and most important point is that you cut off any immediate threat to goal, which would most likely occur when you give away possession in your defensive third. Here we see the ball is with the highlighted player. As he plays a pass that gets intercepted, watch how the blue team reacts. At this moment, it is pretty clear that this player will not be able to recover in time, and that someone else should step to the ball. As we continue, we can see that this player allows too much space, not applying real pressure to the ball, and not eliminating the immediate scoring chance. As we can see, this results in the blue team conceding a goal. In cases where the ball is lost further up the pitch and the opposition poses no immediate threat to goal, a team should first attempt to delay the opposition from advancing the ball forward. Watch here as the blue team gives away possession to the white team. As the player receives it, watch the movement of this player. While he could have been quicker, the player has stepped out to apply pressure and has delayed the player from advancing the ball forward. As he plays it backwards, we see another player step out, making it more difficult for the white team to advance the ball forward. We also see the blue midfield has shifted over to help create a more compact shape. Let's resume play. Because the players have done a good job of delaying play forward and have created a compact shape, they have forced the opposition into giving away possession. Move on to the lesson to work through some scenarios yourself. Welcome to Module 10, Transition from Defending to Attacking. During a match, there are 4 phases of play, shown here. This module will focus on the transition from defending to attacking. In other words, it will teach you what to do in the moments after your team wins possession. Before we begin, here are a few key points to think about during transition. At times when you win the ball close to the opponent's goal, you should be quick to identify dangerous opportunities. As the highlighted player for the blue team gives away the ball, the player, now in possession, understands that the blue team has not had a chance to transition and that they are exposed in this area. Recognizing this, the player takes advantage of the quick goal-scoring opportunity. So, it's important to immediately be thinking about scoring chances when you win the ball close to the opponent's goal. At times, when you win possession further away from the opposition's goal, and there is no opportunity to quickly expose the defending team, you should look quickly to advance forward as a unit and create length, width, and depth. Here we see the ball is with this player for the blue team. As he gives away possession to the white team, let's watch how they transition. We can see that they are transitioning quickly, with players stretching wide and high, with this outside back in particular doing a good job of opening up to create width. As we continue, we can see that the player eventually receives the ball in a wide area, and that the players on the white team are active in their movement in order to create space in an attempt to expose the blue team in transition. As the white team continues to move the ball, keep your eye on the far side of the field. We can see the outside back, here, making a run up the field to create additional length and width. At this moment, we can see 8 players are involved in the attack for the white team. As we continue, we can see that the white team has created a very dangerous chance, just missing off the post. This comes from the white team's ability to transition quickly, identify areas of exposure, create length, width and depth, and advance forward as a unit. Move on to the lesson to work through some scenarios for yourself. Welcome to Module 3, Defending as a Forward. This module will teach you how to defend from the front when your team is in a low press, as well as when your team is in a high press. First, we'll look at how the forwards defend when their team is in a low press. With this strategy, they position themselves further away from the opposition's goal, holding a deeper line of confrontation, generally somewhere in this zone. The line of confrontation is simply where on the field your forward initiates the press. Another term we will use synonymously with the line of confrontation is a defensive block. In this video clip, we will see how the blue forwards defend when playing in a low press. Notice the highlighted player. He is both patient and disciplined in staying connected to the rest of the team, while keeping play in front of him. He mainly operates in and around the centre circle. As the white team moves the ball around, another forward for the blue team slides out, still remaining patient and connected to their teammates, while also cutting off this passing lane into the midfielder. The other forward has slid in here, keeping them compact and connected. The white team continues to move the ball around. Let's pause here and look at this player's decision. While many forwards would be impatient and get pulled out here to win the ball, this player stays composed, understanding that his team is in a low press and is absorbing pressure on purpose. As the ball travels, he tucks back into this space, remaining connected to his team, keeping the ball out in front of him. When in a low press, the goal is not to win the ball immediately, but to restrict the opposing team from advancing the ball into dangerous areas, eventually choosing the right moment to regain possession. Teams may also choose to play with a more aggressive pressing style. As an attacking player, here are some of the things to keep in mind when in a high press. In a high press, the forwards will generally set the line of confrontation somewhere in this zone. Let's see what this looks like in a game scenario. We can first see the blue players are positioned higher up the pitch, setting the line of confrontation closer to the opponent's goal. Now keep your eye on the forward highlighted here. Here, it's the forward's job to force the opposition to one side of the field in order to make play predictable. By making their run like this, the player first cuts off the angle to the other side of the field, then applies pressure. Because they've made the pressuring run like this, the player with the ball has limited options and is forced to playing a long ball to our own team. Move on to the lesson to work through some scenarios for yourself. Welcome to Module 5, Defensive Shifting, Intermediate. This module will apply the pressure, cover, balance model to scenarios in which the ball is centrally located, teaching defenders how to properly step and drop off at different moments. While positioning varies depending on the formation your team plays, defenders can all use a similar framework, shown here. Watch how the blue team reacts to this scenario. We see the player closest to the ball is the one who applies direct pressure on the ball. We then see these two players providing cover for the defender who is pressuring the ball, remaining goal side of the attacking players, not allowing any through balls. Finally, we see this player providing balance, remaining connected to the rest of the defensive unit and denying any ball through to this area, creating a compact shape in the back line. Let's watch some film and see how to apply these concepts in game scenarios. In this first clip, we see an example of good defensive positioning. As the player for the white team receives the ball, let's take a look at the shape of the 4 defenders. Though he could be a bit tighter, we see this player on the black team, who is closest to the ball, first to pressure. We then see this player in a good position to cover the space behind the pressuring defender, close enough to help out if his teammate is beat, while remaining goal side and tight to this player. Though he could be a few steps inside, this player is also in a position to cover the space behind the pressuring defender, and remains aware of a long run from this player. Finally, we see this player providing balance, remaining goal side of the attacker for white, and creating a compact shape in the back line. In this clip, we will see a fairly simple example of how to deal with balls into opposing strikers. The ball is with the highlighted player. Let's watch how the defenders for the white team react. We can see that one has stepped up to challenge the ball, and the others, here, have dropped off to cover the space behind, remaining goal side of the blue players, who are running in behind, ensuring that any ball that gets through, as we see, does not lead to a goal scoring opportunity. When dealing with balls into opposing strikers, it's important for the defenders who are not challenging the ball to drop into the space behind the challenging defender, in case the ball makes it through. Before moving on to the lesson, let's see one bad example. Here we see this player challenging for the ball. As it pops out and is played forward, let's notice the shape of these 2 defenders. Rather than having one dropped off to create depth, we see that they are playing flat, allowing themselves to be beat with one pass. Because of this, we can see that the attacker for the blue team is now released on goal. Move on to the lesson to work through some of these scenarios yourself. Welcome to Module 1, Defensive Shifting, Basic. This module will teach you how to shift as a defensive unit when the ball is in a wide area using the pressure, cover, balance model. As we see here, the highlighted player in the center of the field has possession of the ball, and the 4 defenders for blue are symmetrical and balanced in their shape. As the ball is played out wide, let's watch how they shift. The player closest to the ball should be the one to step to the ball first and apply pressure. The next defender should then slide here, close enough to help out the step defender if the player with the ball takes a big touch around them, providing cover for this space. Then, the remaining defenders should slide over, providing balance for their team, keeping the defensive unit connected and compact. It's also important that the defenders shift together as a unit, all at the same time, so that they do not leave any gaps open for the opposing team to exploit. We can see that the defenders are now in this arc shape, with this player applying pressure on the ball, this player covering the space, and these 2 players maintaining balance across the back. While this shows a backline with 4 defenders, the same concepts of pressure, cover, balance will apply to the backline of any structure. Let's watch some film and see it in action. In this first clip, we will see an example of good defensive shifting. As the ball is played into the player at the bottom of the screen, let's pause and look at the defensive shape of the white team. First, we can see that the closest defender, here, has slid out to apply pressure on the ball. Next, we see the second defender, here, providing cover for this space, close enough to help out in case the pressuring defender gets beat. Finally, we see the other 2 defenders providing balance, keeping their team compact and connected. It's important for these players to be constantly aware of a quick switch to their side of the field. As we can see, the back line for the white team has successfully created the arc shape that we mentioned earlier in the video. Now let's see an example of bad defensive shifting. This time, we see a long switch to the wide player on the blue team. As he receives it and drives forward, we see the pressuring defender allowing a bit too much space between himself and the dribbler, as he should be around arm's length away. Second, we see that no one is providing cover, with the second defender here not even looking in that direction, leaving a large gap between the pressuring defender and the goal. Let's resume play. As the ball moves around, the blue player maintains possession and the white team is now in this shape. When providing cover, you should have enough space between you and the pressuring defender so that the player with the ball cannot beat both of you at the same time. Here, we see this covering defender caught too close to the player who is pressuring, which, as we can see, allows them both to be beat with one quick touch. Now that you've seen some examples of both good and bad defensive shifting, move on to the lesson to work through some scenarios for yourself.
Welcome to Module 8, Attacking Runs. In this module, we will look at 4 types of attacking runs, including checking and spinning out, peeling off, splitting defenders, and runs from midfield. You will first learn what they are, and then learn how and when to execute them. The first, shown here, occurs when the player checks towards the ball, and then spins out to receive the ball in the newly opened space. The second, here, looks at a similar type, in which the player peels off a defender to open up space for a through ball. The third, here, will look at the attacking run that splits 2 defenders and often puts the runner in on goal. The fourth, and last, will look at an attacking run that comes from a midfielder, as we can see here. Now, let's see what these look like in a game scenario. Here, the highlighted attacker will check into this space in order to drag his defender out of position, and then spin off and receive the ball in the space that is left open. As we can see, by drawing the defender out, the player has opened up all of this space to receive it, and now opens up his run to receive the ball in the attacking third. The highlighted player has the ball. As the white team loses possession, let's watch the movement of this player. He will peel out in this direction in order to create separation from the defender. In doing so, we can see that he has created space for this through ball and is released in on goal. Here, we see an entry ball into the forward for the white team, which has pulled this centre back out of position. As the white team works the ball forward, we can also see this player being pulled in this direction. Because the defenders are too focused in on the ball, space here exists, and the runner splits the defenders and gets in on goal. The last attacking run we will look at is a run from midfield. Keep your eye on the midfielder highlighted here. He recognises that these 2 players are running in this direction, dragging defenders out of position and opening up this space. Though he does not make it to the ball, he does a great job of recognising and taking advantage of the space opened up by the attacking players. Now that you've seen some examples of some different types of attacking runs, move on to the lesson to learn more about how to execute them.
Welcome to Module 11, Angles. This module will teach you how to move to create good angles to receive the ball.
When creating good angles, you should be proactively aware of the location of the ball, location of the defenders, your own location, and the location of your teammates.
Let's start with a basic one. The ball is with this player. As the player plays the ball across the back line, this player recognises that the defender is being pressured and slides over here to present a good angle for a pass. By making a good angle, the player creates separation from this pressuring defender, giving themselves more time on the ball. Remember,
Good angles equal more space, and more space equals more time. Let's notice one more thing: body shape. Because the player receiving the ball has been proactive in creating a good angle, he is able to receive it with his hips open to the entire 180 degrees of the field. Had he been late and received the ball with his hips facing goal, he would only have 90 degrees of space to play, and would have lost time having to take the extra touch to turn. This time, the ball is with the goalkeeper. As he plays it out, we see this player open up all the way wide. Again, this ensures that he has maximum space and time when receiving the ball. As he receives it, we see this player move here and this player move here, presenting more good angles and not allowing this defender to cover them. Now, pay close attention to the movement of this player. He remains in this area for a brief moment to provide a good angle to receive the ball from his teammate. But, right as he sees the ball being played to the centre midfielder, he leaves that area to make a great run, again finding space. We can see from this example how a team can use angles to their advantage. Let's see what happens when you present yourself at a bad angle. As the white team wins possession, notice this player standing flat-footed. Rather than tucking into this area to receive the ball, the player remains where he is, and the ball is intercepted. So, it's very important to be proactive in your movement when creating angles. Before moving on to the lesson, here are some additional things to think about when creating angles for your teammates. Welcome to Module 2, Through Runs. This module will focus on these three components of a through run, teaching you what it is, when to make one, and how to execute one. A through run is a run forward into space behind a defender, usually made diagonally. Through balls are dangerous because they confuse defenders and allow a team to get into dangerous areas. We will look at 4 different types of through runs. First, we have a straight pass to a diagonal run, shown here. Next, we see the diagonal pass to a straight run. Third is the diagonal pass to a diagonal run. And last, we see a straight pass to a straight run. This straight pass to straight run option rarely works, and later on in this lesson, you'll learn why. Through balls are very effective in a few scenarios. The first is when the back line is high, as there is all this space behind them for the forward to exploit. The second is when the back line is flat, as one pass has the ability to beat all 4 of these defenders. The third is when a player is out of position, as we see the highlighted defender pulled out, leaving this space open. Let's watch some film and see why some through runs succeeded and why some failed. In this clip, none of the conditions that tell us to play a through ball are met. As the ball works its way to the player at the bottom of the screen, he attempts a fairly straight through ball to this player, who is also making a straight run. Additionally, we can see that no one in the back line for the white team is out of position. They are not caught flat, and they are not holding a very high line. Because of these factors, the through run is unsuccessful. Here, we will see a successful through run, in which the player takes advantage of a defender out of position. As the player at the bottom of the screen plays a ball into the forward for white, we see this centre-back getting drawn out of position. As the white team works the ball up the field, we can see that the player remains out of position, which leaves space open here. The runner takes advantage of this, making a diagonal run and receiving a straight pass, and getting in on goal. In this last example, we see a through run that takes advantage of a defensive line that is flat and high. The ball is with this highlighted player. The runner, here, has noticed that the back line is flat and high, leaving space in behind. So, the player makes a straight run to receive a diagonal pass and is released in on goal. Please move on to the lesson to learn how to properly execute a through run.
Now, let's work through what we learned in the video. We can see the white team in the process of taking a corner kick. As it is played in, we can see a defender for the blue team, here, winning possession of the ball. Let's switch angles and look at the potential to counterattack. We can first see that there is only one player for the white team in a deep position, with one more here still recovering, and two players for the blue team in good positions to counter. As we see the first pass played forward, let's look at the decision of this player. Thinking about what we learned about creating width in a counterattack, which option for a run is better? Correct. Let's first look at the issue with path B. With this path, the player takes more time than necessary to open up all the way wide, which we can see allows enough time for the white team to recover. Let's rewind. With path A, the player understands that he is already far enough away from this defender, and running more directly towards goal, as we see, will quickly put him behind the opposing defenders for white and in on goal. Before moving on to the next scenario, think about what other principles you noticed in this scenario. This time, we see the ball with the highlighted player for the white team. As the blue team intercepts the pass and plays it directly into the striker, here, let's look at the potential to counterattack. Thinking about what we learned in the video, should the highlighted player look to run through, here, or provide support, here? Correct. While it's possible that either option could work, we can see the striker is under pressure, and will need options, and providing a good angle here would allow the player to receive it with his hips facing forward. Let's also think about the recognition of numerical advantages, meaning areas of the field in which your team has more players than the other. Providing support in path B rather than this area, in addition to of course gaining separation from this defender, allows the player to face the side of the field in which his team has a 2v1 numerical advantage. Let's zoom in and continue. As the striker receives it and plays the support pass, let's think about the concept of creating space for teammates in the counterattack. If player 1 wants to create space for player 2, which option for movement is better? Correct. By continuing his run in this direction, the player will continue to drag the defender with him as we see, creating space for player 2. Let's quickly watch the sequence from the perspective of the player receiving the final pass. We can see him beginning his movement forward as soon as he sees his team winning possession, and at this moment recognizes that this player is receiving the pass, and has the time and the open body shape to make a pass through, along with the fact that this defender is distracted by the attacker next to him. We see him angling his run across the back line in order to stay onside, before being released in on goal. Before moving on to the last scenario, think about what other principles you noticed in this scenario. In this last clip, we see the ball with the highlighted player for the blue team, who has just one possession. As he starts to drive forward, he is considering continuing to dribble forward here, or make a pass to one of these two players on his right. Thinking about the idea of engaging defenders, which option is better? Correct. First, there is no pass at this moment that creates an immediately dangerous opportunity. Second, the counterattack is currently a 3v2 situation. By driving forward and engaging this defender, it can easily become a 2v1 situation with these two players. Then, the player in possession needs to make the right passing decision based on where this defender moves. In the case where he follows his current mark, as we see here, space on the weak side is opened for a pass. If instead, the defender was distracted by the player on the weak side, as we see here, a ball to the other player could make sense. So, this was a great example of how you can engage defenders to create numerical advantages during a counterattack. Before moving on to the quiz, think about what other principles you noticed in this scenario. Welcome to Module 89, Counterattacking. This module will teach you some of the key principles of counterattacking. Before we begin, please read over the context for this module. We will look at the following concepts and how they relate to an effective counterattack. Please move on when you're ready. In the first example, we will look at a few different concepts. The ball is with the highlighted player for the red team. As he takes a few touches and gives the ball away, we can see this player for the white team in possession. We can first notice 3 defenders set in deeper positions, which would actually suggest that maybe it's not the best time for a counterattack. But we will see how the white team uses some of the principles we looked at to create one. The first is the recognition that this space is open, and the understanding that a pass into that space could create opportunities. The second is the idea of engaging defenders. If this player for the red team engages with the ball carrier and slides out towards him, then this player can look to receive it in this space to initiate the counterattack. As we continue, we can see the player does receive it, and again, we can see a red defender here engaging with the ball. We can also notice this player for the white team well positioned in the space left open by the red team. When we continue, focus on 2 things. First, watch how the pass being played in front of the player here will allow him to receive it and continue momentum forward. Second, watch the movement of the player with the ball after he makes the pass. We can see that he continues his run forward, and the white team now has a 2v1 to goal after just a few passes. Let's quickly think about the concept of width. When counterattacking, creating width certainly is not a bad thing, but the more time you take to do so, the more time the defense has to recover. So, if this player would have instead made his run forward like this, the red team could very well have time to recover into deeper positions. When we continue to the last portion, think about the idea of engaging this defender by dribbling towards him. Rather than doing so, we can see the player passes it immediately, and the defender for red is able to recover. Let's rewind and look at the decision of the player with the ball. If he would have instead taken a few touches here to engage the defender, he could have drawn him out and created more space for the player receiving the ball. So, the white team did a great job throughout the counterattack, but could have done a bit better at the very end to engage the defender to create more space. Before moving on to the next scenario, take a look at the framework and think about what was done well and what had some room for improvement. In the second and last scenario, the ball is with this player for the red team. As he takes a few touches and gives away possession, we now see the ball with this player for the white team. At this moment, we can see 4 red players caught very far forward, which suggests it could be a good time to counterattack, though they do still have a few defenders set in deeper positions. As one of these players who will most likely be involved, you should be quick to anticipate the counter and begin your movement as soon as possible, and you should notice all of this space that is open. Continuing for a moment, we can see this player receiving the initial pass. There are 2 key concepts to think about here. First, the recognition of this open space we mentioned a moment ago. Second, and thinking about how to play into that space, is the concept of providing support to the initial pass. If this player holds his run to provide support, or this player drops back a few steps to provide support, one of them could receive it facing forward and play a very dangerous pass into this player. Continuing for a brief moment, we can see that they instead push forward and a quick pass into the player on the far side is no longer possible. However, we can see that this player is in a position to receive a pass into this space, which again would allow him to continue the forward momentum into the attack. As the highlighted player receiving the pass, it's important to create enough width to have separation from this defender, but not too much where it would allow the red team too much time to recover. The current path of the player here should be enough separation from the defender, but let's see what happens. At this moment, a pass into this space could be very dangerous, but we can see that it's not played quite hard enough, and the defender is able to get a foot on it. But the attacker does a good job of challenging for it, ultimately winning possession, driving forward towards goal, and finding a decent opportunity. Before moving on to the lesson, take a look at the framework and think about what was done well and what had some room for improvement.
Welcome to Module 12, Building Out from the Back. This module will focus on some of the core themes that exist when building out from the back, listed here. Keep in mind that this module will show back lines with 4 defenders, but again, the same themes exist with back lines of a different structure. Here we will see the blue team setting up for a goal kick. We can first see that the 2 centre backs have split wide to each side of the box to create width and depth. The outside backs have also pushed up and stretched wide, with one here and the other one out of the frame, creating length and width. We also see a central player has dropped in to provide a third passing option, which is very common when building out of the back. The first phase, creating length, width and depth, has been accomplished. The goalie then opts to play the central player, who we will see circulating the ball around, eventually ending up with the centre back who has pushed wide. Take notice of the outside back here, who is stretched all the way to the touchline to create the best possible angle for his teammates. It's important to be proactive in your movement when building out of the back to provide your teammates with good passing angles. Though teams will generally circulate the ball around for longer periods of time, let's check the second phase off the list. As mentioned, it can be helpful to switch the point of attack when building out of the back. As the central player receives the ball, he first realizes that the ball has been on one side of the field for a while, and as a result, all 5 of these players for the white team have shifted over to that side. The player is smart and understands it is a good time to switch the point of attack, playing the ball into a player who has space in front of him to drive forward and initiate an attack. We can now check the last 2 items off the list. Again, teams don't need to strictly follow the checklist, but it does provide a helpful framework when building out of the back. Move on to the lesson to work through some scenarios yourself.
Welcome to Module 78, Defending from the Front. Teams can defend from the front in a variety of different ways. They can play in a high press, starting the pressure high up the field, a medium press, initiating pressure a bit deeper, or a low press. Other terms you may use in place of the word press would be a line of confrontation or a defensive block. In this module, we will not be focusing on a specific type of press, but will rather focus on these fundamentals that teams should understand when defending from the front in general. Please move on when you're ready to see some game film. In this first example, we see the ball with the highlighted player who will play this support pass. As he does so, watch how the white team reacts. At this moment, we can see that they have a numerical advantage in this section of the field, so it would be wise to continue to funnel them towards that side. Thinking about our framework, we can see that the front player is connected to the midfielders, and the midfielders seem to be aware of passing lanes. It's clear that the white team is in a position to force a turnover, but when we continue, let's look at the forward who should be shaping play. Rather than making his pressuring run like this to cut off one side of the field and force play to stay down that side, he pressures like this, as we see. As a result, we can see that the red team is able to escape pressure through this pass. As it's played, we can see these 2 players over-focused on the ball and not aware of passing lanes, leaving this gap open for the player to receive the ball and again break pressure. So, no matter if your team is pressing high or low, it's important as the front player to use your angle of approach to shape play and remain aware of passing lanes while doing so. In this example, we see the ball start with the highlighted goalkeeper for the red team. As he plays it out, we can see one of the front players for white sliding out to pressure, remaining connected to the midfield unit and forcing play backwards. As we continue for a moment, pay close attention to the movement of this attacker for white. Rather than running straight towards the player with the ball, he will run in this path, first cutting off one side of the field and then applying pressure. In doing so, we can see the player in possession is now forced back towards the line. However, this also shows the importance of being aware of passing lanes and also the importance of a team being on the same page. Because this player is not aware of the passing lane out wide, as well as the fact that this player for the red team is allowed space, we can see the red team is able to break pressure and is now on the attack. Please review what we have learned so far and then move on to the lesson when you're ready. Welcome to Module 36, Attacking Corners, 11v11. While there are many different ways to approach corner kicks, this module will teach you one of the most common ways to set up and execute an attacking corner. Here are some of the things that we will be learning. As we can see, about 4 players will cluster around the top of the 18-yard box, often on the far side. We then have 1 player sealing the top of the box, taking care of anything that is poorly cleared, and another player, here, marking the goalie. We then see 3 players holding back. This one may choose to check to receive the short corner and will often hang back initially to avoid being marked, while these 2 will position themselves on either side of the opposing striker. Finally is the player taking the corner. Your team may prefer an in-swinging ball or an out-swinging ball, and also may have the kick taker signal whether the ball will be played near post, far post, or elsewhere. Of course, we won't look at the specific signals because those will be unique to your team. Let's watch some film and see how to execute. Let's first focus on the runners, here. Generally, 1 will run near post, a couple will run centrally, and 1 will run to the far post. A common alternative would be to send 1 near, 1 middle, 1 far, and 1 sealing the very back. Regardless of the exact runs that you will make, the way to make them and time them is similar. In this case, before they make their runs, we see that they are active and clustered, making it difficult for the defenders to mark them. Then, they will move sharply and quickly, timing their runs off of the signal of the kicker and crossing paths to confuse defenders. While they may not have scored in this example, we can see that the runners did a good job of creating separation and a scoring opportunity. Now let's look at 3 very important things that relate to corners. What to do when the ball is poorly cleared, what to do when the corner is overhit, and playing the short corner. Let's first learn what to do if you are one of the players sealing the box and the ball is cleared to you. Keep your eye on this player. As the ball is played in and cleared to him, he finds himself with a decision. Play it 1 touch back in or try to control it. As we see, by taking a touch and trying to control it, the white team is able to win possession and now has a dangerous counterattack because the blue team had so many players committed forward for the corner. This is not to say that you should never try to control it, but be sure that you are aware of the risks of a counterattack so that you can make the best possible decision. Whether you are the player running back post or sealing the box, if the ball comes to you and you don't have a good scoring chance, your first thought should be to send the ball back across the face of goal. Here, we see the ball being played from this side. As it is played, keep your eye on this player. As the ball comes to him, he understands that he does not have a great scoring chance, and that he should send it back across. By doing so, we see a goal is created. In this last clip, we see an example of a short corner kick. These will often go to the outside back on the near side of the field, or, as we see here, the player on the near post. By playing it short to begin, we can see that the red team disorganizes the white team, and it results in an open header right in front of goal. Move on to the lesson to work through some corner kicks for yourself.
Welcome to Module 4, Overlaps and Give and Goes. This module will teach you 2 passing combinations, the overlap and the give and go.
also called a 1-2 pass or a wall pass. It will first teach you what they are, and then teach you the best times to use them, as well as the best way to execute them. Here is an overlap. As one player dribbles forward and draws a defender out, another player will run as shown, around the outside of the player with the ball and into the open space. This run often confuses defenders and creates numbers up situations. Here is a give and go. As one player dribbles forward and draws a defender out, they play a pass, the give, and then run around the defender, the go, to receive the ball back. Here is an overlap in action. As the white team wins the ball, the player in possession dribbles forward. Let's pause and look at this player's decision. They recognise that there is limited space to run in this area, but see all of this space open for an overlap. Taking advantage of this space, the player runs around their teammate with the ball and receives the overlap pass. Here is a give and go in action. As the blue player receives the ball and drives into space, this defender steps out, leaving this space behind them. Rather than trying to dribble past the player, we see the blue player executing the give and go with one of their teammates, ultimately beating the defender. The timing of a give and go is very important. Rather than playing the pass one touch, this player will hold the ball for a couple of seconds. Let's see what happens. Because the player has waited a couple of seconds to play the go, the pass gets caught behind the player receiving it, and the blue team loses possession of the ball. There may be times that taking a touch before playing the go pass is helpful, but most of the time, the go pass should be done in one touch. Move on to the lesson to work through some scenarios yourself, and learn more about timing and execution.
Welcome to Module 14, Switching Play. Switching play is the process of moving the ball from one side of the field to the other to create space and ultimately advance the ball forward. This module will teach you how to recognize moments to switch play, and will then teach you how to execute. Let's start with some cues and some common moments that suggest a switch of play, listed here. The ball is with this player. As he drives forward, he eventually runs out of space. We can now see that the orange team has overloaded this side of the field. There are no clear options to advance the ball forward, and this space is wide open and exposed, all cues that suggest a switch of play. Before we resume, let's look at the execution phase, which we see outlined here. Now let's resume. We can first see that this player has dropped back to provide a good angle to receive the ball. As he moves into this position, he should be sure to have his head on a swivel, scanning the other side of the field so that he has a clear picture as he receives it. Last, we can see that he has received it on his back foot, in this case his right foot, allowing him to open up his hips to the far side of the field. We can also see this midfielder moving to provide a good angle to be another link to the weak side of the field. It's often a good idea to backpedal in this scenario so that you don't have to turn in order to receive it facing forward. Luckily, the player is smart, receiving it with a good body shape, again, checking his shoulder for a good picture of the field and allowing his team to start the process of switching play to the weak side of the field. Let's pause again and look at the last piece, the movement of the weak side player we see here, most commonly an outside back or outside midfielder. Here are some things to think about as a weak side player when switching play. Resuming, we can see that the player has done a good job of recognizing cues, moving forward quick enough to eliminate this player, and eventually getting a shot off from just outside the 18. In this scenario, we will see a slightly more direct example of switching play. As the white team moves the ball around, we see the red team beginning to overload one side of the field. Then, as this player receives it, let's watch the movement of this player. We can see that he backpedals a few steps to create a good angle to receive the ball, and we can see that he has properly received it on his back foot. We can also see the other defender for white has slid back this way to create a good angle. But let's notice the movement of this player on the very left side of the screen. A few seconds ago, the player was positioned more centrally, but by staying engaged and picking up on cues that a switch of play was coming, he has moved into a higher and wider position. Because of this, the player in possession, as we see, can skip the second link and play a more direct switch, which has resulted in lots of space for the white team to advance the ball forward. Before moving on to the lesson, here is a review of what we went over in this video.
Now let's work through what we learned in the video. In this first scenario, the highlighted goalkeeper for the white team has just gained possession, and we can see the blue team dropping off, playing a relatively low press. The forward for blue is deciding between these two options. Which is better given the context? Correct. As we learned, it's important to stay connected and be on the same page as the rest of your teammates. Tucking back here, the player remains connected to the midfield unit and also remains aware of the passing lane into this player. Let's switch angles and continue. As the goalkeeper rolls the ball out to the defender, we see the players adjusting. Understanding that his team is playing in a low press, which option is better for the attacking player to move? Correct. Dropping in here, we can see that the player remains connected to the midfield unit and eliminates the passing lane into this player. Just like in any type of press, as this player continues to come forward, then the attacker can choose the right time to apply pressure, and as always, should do so in a way that shapes play and makes it predictable for his teammates. Here we see the ball with the highlighted player for the white team, who will be passing it to his teammate. As he plays the ball, we can see the blue team has shifted over, pressing higher up the field. We can see that in this section they have a clear numerical advantage, and let's assume that the communication from the midfielders is to continue to force play to that side of the field. With that said, as this attacker, how should you approach the player with the ball? Correct. Let's first look at the issue with option B. By approaching the ball like this, the forward for blue allows the highlighted player in possession to turn and play it the other way. This could easily allow the white team to attack down the other side of the field with a numerical advantage. Additionally, all the work to slide over by the rest of the blue team would have essentially been for nothing. Now let's go back and see the correct option. By approaching the ball like this, the player cuts off one side of the field before applying pressure and continues to funnel the player into the more crowded area. We can see that by pressuring like this, the blue forward has essentially eliminated 5 players for the white team as potential passing options. Of course, it's very important for the midfielders and the rest of the team to be on the same page, keeping pressure on the opposing players, cutting off passing lanes, and remaining connected to the front player. Now that you've worked through a couple scenarios for yourself, please review what we have learned before moving on to the quiz.
Now, let's build off what we learned in the video. In this example, we see the ball with a highlighted player. As it is circulated around, we see the white team overloading one side of the field. As the ball is played into this player, the center midfielder, here, wants to initiate the switch. Where should he move in order to do so? Correct. Option A would only move the player into more crowded space, in which it would be difficult to receive it and turn, and option B would not create a good angle to be able to receive the initial pass. Option C, however, would create a good angle for the passer and allow the player time and space to open up his hips to switch the ball. Let's switch angles and continue. Now, as he drops in to receive it, where should this player begin to move? Correct. The player should first notice that the white team has overloaded that side of the field, and that space here is open and exposed. Next, the player should recognize that the midfielder receiving the ball has space and time, suggesting a switch of play is realistic. By reading the movement of the center midfielder right as it happens, the weak side player can get an early start on his run. As we continue, let's test you with one more piece. Which foot should the midfielder receive the ball with, right or left? Correct. By receiving it with his right foot, the player opens up his hips and body to allow him to switch play. As we can see, because the player has executed the switch of play quickly, and because the weak side player was proactive in his movement, options now exist for the blue team in the attack. Now, let's see another example. Oftentimes, a switch of play will have to start with a ball played backwards, often known as a negative pass. We can see that the highlighted player with the ball is under pressure with no options forward. As he plays the support pass, we see this central player doing a good job of moving into the gap. As the ball travels, where should this player move? Correct. The player receiving the ball will likely be under pressure, so it's important for the center back to create a good angle to provide an outlet. The central player is already occupying path B, and path A would not provide a good angle to receive it. Option C creates a good angle and separation from the defender. We now see this picture, with the white team shifted over heavily to one side, and space on the weak side open, again suggesting a switch of play. Which player is in a better position to initiate it efficiently and quickly? Correct. It's possible for a ball to be played into player A and then played back, but player B provides the safest and quickest option to switch play. As the player receives it, which direction should his first touch take him? Correct. A touch to the left would take him away from pressure and allow him to switch play quickly. As we learned previously, we can see that the weak side player is doing a good job of being proactive and opening up early. Before moving on to the quiz, here is another review of what we went over.
Welcome to Module 7, Movement off of the ball. In a typical match, a player will usually be in possession of the ball for no more than about 90 seconds, so the way you move when you don't have the ball is extremely important. This module will teach you how to use your movement off of the ball to create space for your teammates, and also how to create space for yourself. Let's see some examples of good movement. As the highlighted player in possession drives forward, keep your eye on this attacking player. He continues his run in this direction in order to drag defenders with him, which creates a great opportunity for a through ball here. At no point does the player intend nor expect to receive the ball. Instead, he is purposeful in the way that he moves to open up space for his teammate. This time, keep your eye on the highlighted forward. Rather than trying to force a through run or check into space already occupied by his teammate, he continues to drift into this area. In doing so,
the defender stays with him, and this player for the blue team can receive it with loads of space to turn. This time, the white team receives the ball off a clearance. Let's watch this player. Rather than moving here into more open space, the player realizes that his teammate here is wide open in that space. The player remains in place, even moving a few steps into the more crowded area to continue to pull defenders away from his teammate, which ultimately creates a scoring chance. In this last example, we will see how a player can also use movement to open up space for themselves. The ball is with this player. As he plays a long switch across the field, keep your eye on the highlighted attacker. Currently, the player is in the line of vision of his defender, but before he plans to check to receive the ball, he drifts in behind the defender, as we see here, before making a few quick hard steps back to check to the ball. By doing this, the defender loses track of his location, and he finds himself with a few yards of separation to receive the ball and turn with it. Now that you've seen some examples of how you can move off the ball to create space for yourself and for your teammates, move on to the lesson for a chance to try these in action. Welcome to Module 6, Playing Into and Off of a Forward. In this module, we will learn the correct times to play into the forward's feet versus playing into space. Then, we will learn the proper way to play off of the forward as they receive it. The first and most important point is that the passer and the forward communicate and get on the same page. Here, we can see that this highlighted forward does not look ready to receive the ball to his feet, and the result is a loss of possession. The second thing to look for when playing into a forward is whether or not they have space in front of them to receive the ball. Here, we see the ball played into the forward, who has all of this space to receive it, allowing him the time to make a good decision, as well as the space for his teammates to provide supporting options. Once the forward is ready to receive it, with space in front to do so, we move on to the third piece, which involves the midfielders creating good supporting angles to provide options to the forward receiving the ball. As the white team plays a ball into their forward, we see this player caught sleeping, as he should be in this space, away from his defender, ready to receive the layoff from the forward. Because he is not in a good supporting position, the white team struggles to maintain possession. Now let's see what happens when the players are on the same page, there's space for the forward to receive it, and the midfield provides support. As the white team wins possession, we can see the forward, here, asking for the ball into his feet. We can also see all of the space that he has in front of him to receive it. As he receives it, we see this midfielder has moved into a good supporting position. As we can see, when executed correctly, playing into the forward's feet can be very dangerous. Please move on to the lesson to work through some scenarios yourself.
Welcome to Module 14, Switching Play. Switching play is the process of moving the ball from one side of the field to the other to create space and ultimately advance the ball forward. This module will teach you how to recognize moments to switch play, and will then teach you how to execute. Let's start with some cues and some common moments that suggest a switch of play, listed here. The ball is with this player. As he drives forward, he eventually runs out of space. We can now see that the orange team has overloaded this side of the field. There are no clear options to advance the ball forward, and this space is wide open and exposed, all cues that suggest a switch of play. Before we resume, let's look at the execution phase, which we see outlined here. Now let's resume. We can first see that this player has dropped back to provide a good angle to receive the ball. As he moves into this position, he should be sure to have his head on a swivel, scanning the other side of the field so that he has a clear picture as he receives it. Last, we can see that he has received it on his back foot, in this case his right foot, allowing him to open up his hips to the far side of the field. We can also see this midfielder moving to provide a good angle to be another link to the weak side of the field. It's often a good idea to backpedal in this scenario so that you don't have to turn in order to receive it facing forward. Luckily, the player is smart, receiving it with a good body shape, again, checking his shoulder for a good picture of the field and allowing his team to start the process of switching play to the weak side of the field. Let's pause again and look at the last piece, the movement of the weak side player we see here, most commonly an outside back or outside midfielder. Here are some things to think about as a weak side player when switching play. Resuming, we can see that the player has done a good job of recognizing cues, moving forward quick enough to eliminate this player, and eventually getting a shot off from just outside the 18. In this scenario, we will see a slightly more direct example of switching play. As the white team moves the ball around, we see the red team beginning to overload one side of the field. Then, as this player receives it, let's watch the movement of this player. We can see that he backpedals a few steps to create a good angle to receive the ball, and we can see that he has properly received it on his back foot. We can also see the other defender for white has slid back this way to create a good angle. But let's notice the movement of this player on the very left side of the screen. A few seconds ago, the player was positioned more centrally, but by staying engaged and picking up on cues that a switch of play was coming, he has moved into a higher and wider position. Because of this, the player in possession, as we see, can skip the second link and play a more direct switch, which has resulted in lots of space for the white team to advance the ball forward. Before moving on to the lesson, here is a review of what we went over in this video. Welcome to Module 14, Switching Play. Switching play is the process of moving the ball from one side of the field to the other to create space and ultimately advance the ball forward. This module will teach you how to recognize moments to switch play, and will then teach you how to execute. Let's start with some cues and some common moments that suggest a switch of play, listed here. The ball is with this player. As he drives forward, he eventually runs out of space. We can now see that the orange team has overloaded this side of the field. There are no clear options to advance the ball forward, and this space is wide open and exposed, all cues that suggest a switch of play. Before we resume, let's look at the execution phase, which we see outlined here. Now let's resume. We can first see that this player has dropped back to provide a good angle to receive the ball. As he moves into this position, he should be sure to have his head on a swivel, scanning the other side of the field so that he has a clear picture as he receives it. Last, we can see that he has received it on his back foot, in this case his right foot, allowing him to open up his hips to the far side of the field. We can also see this midfielder moving to provide a good angle to be another link to the weak side of the field. It's often a good idea to backpedal in this scenario so that you don't have to turn in order to receive it facing forward. Luckily, the player is smart, receiving it with a good body shape, again, checking his shoulder for a good picture of the field and allowing his team to start the process of switching play to the weak side of the field. Let's pause again and look at the last piece, the movement of the weak side player we see here, most commonly an outside back or outside midfielder. Here are some things to think about as a weak side player when switching play. Resuming, we can see that the player has done a good job of recognizing cues, moving forward quick enough to eliminate this player, and eventually getting a shot off from just outside the 18. In this scenario, we will see a slightly more direct example of switching play. As the white team moves the ball around, we see the red team beginning to overload one side of the field. Then, as this player receives it, let's watch the movement of this player. We can see that he backpedals a few steps to create a good angle to receive the ball, and we can see that he has properly received it on his back foot. We can also see the other defender for white has slid back this way to create a good angle. But let's notice the movement of this player on the very left side of the screen. A few seconds ago, the player was positioned more centrally, but by staying engaged and picking up on cues that a switch of play was coming, he has moved into a higher and wider position. Because of this, the player in possession, as we see, can skip the second link and play a more direct switch, which has resulted in lots of space for the white team to advance the ball forward. Before moving on to the lesson, here is a review of what we went over in this video.
Now that you understand how to recognize cues for a through run, let's learn more about how to make them. Keep your eye on the forward on the white team highlighted above. As he moves across the field, he must now decide which through run to make. Which option is best given the positioning of the defenders? Correct. Let's first take a look at why option A is not recommended. While this option is a more direct route to goal, there is not enough space behind the centre backs for the forward to run into without the goalie coming out and intercepting the ball. Let's find out what happens when the player chooses this run. As expected, the space between the backline and the goalkeeper was not enough for the forward to collect the through ball. Here we see the correct run, option B. This time, the forward for white, making the run, recognises that the left back for the blue team, highlighted here, has been pulled out of position, leaving all this space behind him. The player with the ball passes it into the open space for the runner to run onto, and the white team now has an opportunity on goal. Now, let's look at a through run that takes advantage of a back line that is flat and high, which is often more direct. As the defender for the white team receives the ball, he must make a decision. Option A is seen here. The highlighted forward will turn and make a straight run, and the player with the ball will play a flighted through ball, also straight, into the space. Here is option B. This time, the other forward will make a curving, diagonal run across the back line and break into the open space to receive a straight ball from the passer. Here are the two options again. Though both options could work, choose the better option. Correct! Let's first look at why option A is not suggested. In order to stay onside when executing a through ball, timing is key. When making a straight run and receiving a straight pass, it is very difficult to time it perfectly. Here, we see a player caught offside. Another problem with this player making the straight run is that they only have this amount of space to build speed to run onto the ball, whereas the other forward has all of this path as their runway. On top of this, if the highlighted player makes the run, the two defenders will have to make a quick decision about who will follow him, likely confusing them. Here we'll see option B, in which the highlighted forward makes their run along the offside line until the ball is released from the defender's foot, at which point he breaks and is released in on goal. Let's see what this looks like from a player's perspective. As a player, the first thing you should notice in this situation is the back line being both flat and high. These are both signs that a more direct through ball could be a great option. You take a glance and see the ball travelling to a player that has space to play a through ball. This is a cue to begin your run. Again, make sure you run even with the back line as we see here, in order to both gain speed and stay onside. Then, the moment you see your teammate playing the ball, break the line and run onto the ball. Let's work through one more scenario. The ball is with the highlighted player. As he gives away possession to the white team, we see these two options for through runs. Based on the cues that you have learned, which option is better? Correct. While it's possible that either option could work, option A is better. With option B, the white team does not really take advantage of these two blue defenders who have been pulled out of position. Additionally, it will be very difficult to make a pass straight towards goal in this position, as the goalkeeper will likely cut it out. With option A, the white team takes advantage of the two players who have been pulled out of position, attacking the space they leave open, here. Additionally, by playing it to this runner, the player is able to receive it with his hips and body facing goal, as we can see. Before moving on to the quiz, here is a quick review of what we have learned so far.